A scrape across her cheek, a bruise on her lower back, a rug burn on her spine, and a rope already tied, already there, clenched in someone's hand like a reflex. This wasn't just violence, but they couldn't stop it once it started. A moment of shame, a scream, a slap, and then everything broke. They didn't mean to kill her. They meant to shut her up, stop the crying, fix what couldn't be undone. But by the time the rope pulled tight, it was too late. What we see on her body isn't just evidence. It's the trail of someone unraveling. In this episode, we continue to discuss behavioral and forensic analysis of JonBenet Ramsey's injuries. Sit tight. So welcome back. Last time we were talking about sort of the brain injuries and some of the particular injuries to JonBenet Ramsey, and we were talking about the force that it took. When we described it as a choking hazard, but we described the force that it took to really. We talked about the experience of JonBenet, the force of the experience, what she was experiencing, that would cause the upward pressure into her face to cause the particular dots and things of that nature in the eyes. We showed some of these pictures for the subdural hemorrhaging and all such as that. We talked about the subarachnoid hemorrhaging that was described on the first page of the autopsy report, really focusing on those highlights that we said it felt like JonBenet would have felt like she was being kicked in the head really hard. That's when she got hit by whatever she got hit by, whether it was a flashlight or a bat or something else. She felt as if she was kicked in the head. And we talked about the sheer intentionality. We talked about the temporal pole contusions when she was hit, and how it was like a whiplash effect, and how when she brought back her brain, when it came back to her brain, sort of rebounded and hit the front of her head. And so while her head had stopped, her brain was still moving, causing these temporal lobe contusions that you might see. And then we just kind of moved forward with some of um, these particular marks as exemplified here by this user on TikTok. And just to kind of give us an example of what we're talking about, what we mean. And then we kind of went through something like this to kind of look at the particular spots in the bottom of the eye, and some of the particular spots in the eyes here, sort of kind of like this idea that blood vessels in JonBenet's eyes are bursting because of the upward pressure, the amount of upward pressure. Because as we talk about, when we think about the assault of JonBenet Ramsey, we're not talking about somebody who's, when they're assaulting her, they're applying pressure in a very sick way. They're applying pressure because this is their fantasy. They're applying it and then taking it off, applying it and taking it off, and then they make a mistake and apply it too hard. We are talking about somebody that is applying pressure and holding pressure, and not only holding pressure, but they are tightening the pressure. And not only are they tightening the pressure, they're tightening it so much that it's causing upward pressure, so that blood cannot seep through, and it's causing blood vessels to pop. And that's where you start to get the spots all over the face and stuff like that. And then at some point in time, like we just showed, the hemorrhaging. Let me see if I can find the pictures. We talked about these comminuted fractures that JonBenet experienced, linear comminuted fractures, when you have breaking in different places, but then you have this linear pattern that that kind of goes throughout her skull. And I just want to show one more picture. This picture, when we talk about a comminuted, linear, depressed, basilar. So just kind of trying to get an idea exactly what JonBenet went through in the autopsy report, as according to the first page of the autopsy report. Now, where we're starting from is the part or number three, when we were talking about the right cheek abrasion. Okay. And before we get going, I want to shout out to a special person. I want to say what's up to Trace the Ace for once again contributing to the channel. Thanks so much, Trace. I appreciate you. I really do. Thanks for supporting once again and always keeping me on my toes and keeping it funny and keeping it light. But you know, your blood pressure. You know, I understand that some of you have mentioned several times needing blood. When you listen to John Ramsey, sometimes you might need your blood pressure pills or something like that. Hey, yeah, man. Because, anyways, but thank you, Trace, for contributing to the channel again. A big hug. And thank you for my community members and my army for supporting me in the chat, liking and sharing and subscribing and such as that. So let's jump into this video. Hope you enjoy this next video, Trace. Okay, so last time we talked about we dove into sort of this rope around the neck area. We talked to it being tightly sort of around, so sort of to kind of cut off circulation. And then we went into the craniocerebral trauma. Now remember, this is just the first page of the autopsy report. We're not talking about anything else. Even though we are aware of other things in the autopsy report, we're not even getting there yet. We're acting like we don't know. We're talking about the very beginning stages, the parts of the autopsy report, or the very beginning of the autopsy report, just the first page. That's all we're talking about. We are talking about the final diagnosis, the highlights that Dr. Meyer gives us and says, this is important for me to put on page one of this autopsy report. Above anything else, if you don't read anything else, this is what you need to know, kind of like a summary. That's what we're talking about. So obviously, even though you're aware of other things in the autopsy report, we just kind of want to walk down and walk through very slowly this part of the autopsy report in terms of the final diagnosis. So moving on to part three, and we're just trying to understand what exactly JonBenet experienced. Because if we can understand more about what JonBenet experienced as she was dying or what have her, what have you, we can understand what kind of crime, what kind of murder, what kind of homicide this was. So we're not, this is the thing that is very frustrating about this case in general, is that it's well, did you look over here, or what if this was, what if this was, what about, oh, it could have been this, it could have been this, could have been a lot of things. We're not asking what it could have been. We're trying to get down to what it is, right? There are a lot of factors in anything. I get that. But we are trying to ask what it is, what happened. Yeah, JonBenet could have jumped off a balcony. Absolutely. She could have. But given the circumstances and what the autopsy is telling us, did she jump off a balcony? That's the question we're asking. And so with this autopsy report, given everything, with the assault, cool. But did an assault, like we think an assault happens, did that happen? That's what we're asking. So we want to know. And so we talked about, I think, number three, go back to the report here. There was an abrasion of the right cheek that we talked about, okay? And so kind of getting back to my notes, sort of like if we put it in a layperson's perspective, it's kind of like a scrape or a rash. And I need this because I'm not a medical person. And so I'm going on Google and I'm going on AI and I'm like, man, what are these terms? What does this mean? What's the implications of this? So trying to understand. So a scrape or a rash like area on the right side of the face. For example, you get maybe like a carpet burn or hitting something with some texture. Okay, it's kind of like what we're talking about here. And last video we talked about, when we were talking about this, the first part of this on part one, we talked about the fact that in Michigan in 1993, when Burke was probably like 6 years old, and JonBenet, and as some of you have mentioned, and JonBenet was like 3 years old, Burke would have probably been around 50 pounds, probably about 4'2" at the time. JonBenet would have been 3 years old, scheduled to turn 4 later on in the year in August, but she would have been 3 years old, probably around 30 pounds, right? And so Burke, when she died, if I understand correctly, Burke had a foot on her in terms he was like a foot taller than her, and man, Burke was almost I won't say almost twice her size, but he had some weight on her. He was 70 pounds and JonBenet was 45 pounds, if I'm remembering correctly. I know JonBenet was 45 pounds for sure. But anyways, Burke, according to Patsy in the 97 and 98 interview, she talked about it in 97 and then clarified even further in 1998. Burke was outside and JonBenet was outside. They were outside in the yard in Charlottesville, Michigan for the summer, and Burke was swinging his little golf club. I think she said it was like a plastic golf club with a little wiffle ball and stuff like that. And he swung it and hit JonBenet in the eye, in the face, and in the leg. And I was like, how I don't understand how the head and the leg, like. And so Patsy describes this scenario to where she comes flying off the porch and she slams an ice pack on JonBenet's face. And we talked about the language around that and stuff like that, how it just doesn't sit right. And probably the anger that Patsy would have been showing to Burke, to kind of make sure that he's taking care of his sister and stuff like that, and not being mean and not being rude and making sure that he's watching where he's swinging for sure. And Patsy talks about how it's so important. JonBenet was going to get a black. She was going toward a black eye. I think she had a black eye, but Patsy mentioned that she took JonBenet at 4 years old to to a plastic surgeon to make sure that JonBenet didn't need any uh, any work, preventative work or what have you. And the doctor said, no, it's a black eye. It's going to heal. And so we from that, we get the idea that this hit must have been serious, right? And so I'm just going to leave that there. But that's what we talked about. And what I'm talking about here is there was an abrasion, and Patsy and John mentioned abrasion in their interviews. In 97, Patsy mentioned the word abrasion, and in 1998 she mentioned it, and then 98 John mentioned the word abrasion, I believe. And so anyways, uh, the interpretation here when we're talking about the abrasion on the right cheek, right? Something again, around the eye, on the right cheek here, could be here, could be here, but around the eye, right? Something's going on around the eye. So it could be the case that, yes, um, we talked about JonBenet was a little feisty when you wake her up at night and she's kicking and she doesn't want to go to the restroom. So she's kicking and Nidra's like, man, JonBenet will beat you up. You'll catch your elbow and whatever, because JonBenet, that's what she does. So we talk about this idea that JonBenet could have been cranky when you wake her up or for any reason until she has her morning coffee. JonBenet's a little cranky. I'm being funny. Obviously, I don't know if she drank coffee or not, but until JonBenet is fully awake, she is very cranky and she's very ornery, right? Looking to take people's stuff and mess with people just to be messing with people, just because, some kids are like that, man. It's like, man, stop. You coming over here to mess with me. Stop messing with me just cause, and if it's the case, and we talked about on one of the earlier episodes with the blood in the urine, that we find evidence according to the forensic reports that there was blood on certain items that were directly linked to JonBenet, and there was urine on certain items, maybe indicating that JonBenet may have used the restroom that night. And so we know that according to Burke, he got up. We know that according to JonBenet, according to the forensic evidence, JonBenet may have also gotten up, because we see what we said when we talked about the trail. We see that JonBenet, she had covers on her. She may have used the restroom on those covers, and then she may have got up in the middle of the night, gone into the restroom, taken the soiled pants off, turned them inside out, left them there, as Patsy said she is prone to do. When she takes clothes off, she just leaves them there, wherever, right? And so she may have just left those clothes there, said, I don't have any problem with this, just left them there, and went on about her business. And then after doing that, used the restroom, wiped herself. There was urine on a toilet tissue sample, right? Wiped herself, and then didn't flush the toilet. They asked John about it. They asked Patsy about it. And they said JonBenet may have been prone to not flushing the toilet. That wouldn't be out of the usual. And so that tracks us not only from the bed, if JonBenet would have gotten up, but that tracks us from the bed to the bathroom. And JonBenet would have gotten up and gone to the bathroom. We don't know if she went back to bed, but it's kind of clear that she may have gotten up. And it's also clear when Patsy was saying that she changes the covers when JonBenet uses the bathroom on herself before Linda Hoffman Pugh comes over in the morning. And Linda Hoffman Pugh wasn't scheduled to come over on Thursday morning, but Patsy would say before Linda would arrive, she would change the covers. If JonBenet had used the restroom on herself, she would change the covers and put them in the washer and the dryer for her. And so when you go look at the bed for JonBenet Ramsey, it looks as if those linen blankets have been stripped off. And that's why the bed looks that way it is. It looks like it's turned way down. And that's what we're talking about. So, anyways, let's continue moving. And so, what we ask when we think about this right cheek abrasion, right? It's close to the right eye, or it's close to the eye. So some damage, whatever is happening, could be some roughhousing or whatever. Somebody being dragged on the carpet or hitting some sort of rough carpet or something, or getting hit in some way, shape, or form. It's an abrasion. It's a skin abrasion. Patsy mentioned that when JonBenet was hit in Michigan, she called it a skin abrasion, right? And it actually turned out to be a black eye. And so it could have been that JonBenet got hit very hard. There could have been a fight that ensued, that JonBenet was fighting with someone, right? And so again, we're not in that case, we're not talking about an assault in that way. We're talking about a fight, right? Okay. So the question that we might ask about this is, was she dragged before or after she was unconscious? And that's likely, which aligns with her being limp. Could it indicate a fall? Yes, possibly, or a push, or a collapse. She may have been pushed. I think there was a lot of, and I'm just going to call it roughhousing, but not in roughhousing in a playful way, but sort of like this rough interaction that she had. She may have gotten hit with something prior to being hit over the head, right? Because all we see is the subarachnoid, or the subdural damage. Let me make sure I'm not mixing up terms. But all we see in the craniocerebral injuries is the subarachnoid subdural hemorrhaging, or the hemorrhage, right? That's the biggest thing that we focus on. But I think that we forget that there was an abrasion. There are abrasions to her body, like she had been beat up. There was a fight, I think, that ensued. We don't see, I don't think, anything under the fingernails that would suggest anybody else's skin, in the way that nowadays we would see that and say, okay, somebody definitely attacked her. But I think what we do see, or what we can see, is that JonBenet may have been in a fight before. So it might not have been what we think, as in somebody, as they showed on the CBS documentary. It might not have been somebody taking an object, right? So it may not have been somebody taking an object and then hitting the object, or hitting the person, right? It could have been something like a boom, boom, right? And so in that way, we're not loading up, and it may not have been one. It may have been a couple, because it may have been like, it could have been a holding of the string, right? For whatever reason, a holding of the string, like you're pushing and you're fighting, and then the person runs and grabs this string, and JonBenet is standing there, and she's like, yo, we in it. We fighting. And the person goes and grabs his string. For whatever reason, she did something to them. They go and grab this string, and they say, they go and grab this string, and she doesn't know what's coming, but she knows she's going to stand her ground, because she's ornery. She knows she's going to stand her ground. And so they wrap the string around her, and she's like trying to fight and get it off, and this and that. And this is, hypothetical, could be the case. I don't know. I'm just saying. And she's fighting it. And so the person is pulling it, like, y'all are fighting, y'all are fighting. And Could have been a smack to the face or something like that coming from JonBenet, and then the person now you taking it, you smack me in my face. I didn't want you to touch me. Not, I didn't want you to put your hands on me. Now you smack me in my face. Now we got to go to the next level. And so I leave off because I'm still holding, right? I'm still holding on to. I want to thank my cologne bottle for being a willing participant, but I'm still holding on to this. And so if I see something else, another item in the corner, and I go over there and I pick up this item, and you smack me in my face because I'm fighting you, and then I'm trying to get the best of you, the better of you, and I don't expect you to fight me back because you made me mad, and the justice is according to my perspective now. And if we're in a fight, of course you're gonna hit me, but I don't like it. And so I'm gonna go pick up this other item, right? I'm gonna go pick up this other item, and when I come back to you, you know, I'm just gonna start, boom, 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 all over. I'm gonna start hitting all over. So I'm not necessarily aiming and targeting. I'm hitting all over, but when I'm hitting, I'm slamming down. I'm smashing down because I'm mad. So checking. I'm not necessarily checking my strength, right? Because I'm flying. I'm in a rage, and I'm not necessarily checking my strength, right? Because what does this tell us? If there's an abrasion on her cheek, and abrasions in different parts and contusions, and all such as that, and this pops up with the craniocerebral injuries, it does not lead to somebody assaulting her with the SA. It does not lead to that. What it leads to, what it leads to, and that's going to come in. We're not forgetting that. We're not. We're going to hang. We got a hold of that. We're keeping that. But it does not lead to this idea that JonBenet was just laid down and that was it. I don't think so. I don't think so. Let me know what you think. But I don't think that would be the case, right? So let's go on to number 4 because I really want to finish this. So time out. Okay, we got a little bit. Okay, whoa. Okay, so number 4, the right shoulder contusion is a bruise and scrape on her upper back. The example of the kind of mark that you'd get when you're hitting a wall or being shoved onto a surface, something like that, suggesting that she was pushed or fell backward, doesn't suggest like somebody playing. It suggests like a level of force. And so you kind of dig deeper and you ask, could this be roughhousing though? Could we be talking about just somebody roughhousing? Not necessarily. It's too severe. More consistent with somebody being intentional. And what kind of force does this require? A push strong enough to knock a 45-pound child off balance or back into something. Now, okay, now when we think about how or where JonBenet may have died, we look at something like this. Now, this is going down into the basement, okay? So we're going down into the basement, and first off, you can clearly see how dirty it is. It's dirty everywhere. You got stuff everywhere. And even if this is not the extent in which JonBenet, or the sort of the setting in which JonBenet died, maybe it was cleaner, um, but maybe not. And I also want you to take note back here. Take note back there that the light is on, but you have this lighted hallway, right? John said the morning of, and I'm just going to drop this nugget in your ear. John said the morning of, he didn't have need for a flashlight because it was light enough. So he didn't, he was trying to say, I didn't even use a flashlight. I didn't even have that flashlight. I usually keep that flashlight in a junk drawer. My flashlight was in a junk drawer. I didn't even need it because when I went to go search that morning, it was light enough for me to see. And so when we talk about that, and so when he came here, he didn't turn on the light. When he came and he was looking in here, he didn't turn on the light. And I'm specifically looking at the wine cellar back here. He didn't turn on the light. So I know the light is on, but John said he didn't turn on the light. I think he doesn't remember. He didn't think he turned the light on. He just kind of saw it, right? And Patsy uses similar language when she talks about discovering that JonBenet was gone. She said, I just looked in there, when she read the note and ran back up to JonBenet's room, she just opened the door and she just kind of looked in there and she just knew. She just knew that JonBenet was gone. She just knew it. And so John uses similar language by saying, "Oh, I just knew that she was gone, or that she was dead. I just saw her, or I knew that was her." And so this begs the question, and I'll get back to my analysis. This begs the question: how the heck, with no lights, can you see JonBenet? But because it's light enough for you to see, but Fleet White ain't gonna see it. Man, come on, it gotta make sense. But anyways, as you come down here and you see the train room over here, but you see the bathroom to your left over here. But as you're looking down, you see a chair. Now, wouldn't this be a good chair to sneak out of a window with? Right? You wouldn't have to stand it, and it's closer to it helps you get closer to the window because it's a pretty high window. I'd say the window is probably almost uh 6 feet high, something like that. Maybe five, maybe up to the chest of somebody's like 5'8", maybe 5'9", something like that. Yeah, maybe, or maybe 5'6". So. But anyways, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great to have something like this? Helping you hoist yourself up so you can get through the window without struggling on a wobbly suitcase. Okay, just. But anyways, look at all this mess on the ground. Look at all this stuff on the ground. All stuff everywhere. And so it could have been this environment in which could have been this environment in which JonBenet is existing, right? And she's here and she's being beaten up and we're just going at it. We're just tussling. We're just going back and forth, and I'm fighting you, and you're fighting me, and I'm getting knocked back. But JonBenet is 45 pounds. She can't hold her own against whoever this is. And she's getting beat up pretty bad, man. She's getting knocked into things, and those things are cutting her. But had to be something that hit her pretty hard to make her keep going, to where she didn't even think about it. And I guess that's what I'm saying. So let me get back to my notes here. We're talking about a 45-pound child being knocked off balance or backing into something. Okay, let's move on. The lower left back and leg abrasions. Um, so sort of like scrapes on the lower back or the back of her left leg. For example, injuries that could occur from being dragged on the floor. So if we interpret it this way, we might say these scrapes suggest that she was pulled after her death or near death. Left-sided nature implies that she was pulled with her left side dragging more heavily. Okay. So some of the questions that we might ask about this, oh, we're doing pretty good. Some questions that we might ask about this is, was she dragged by her legs or her arms? And it's likely that she was dragged, given the angle of those sort of abrasions and contusions. It's likely that she was dragged by her arms. So she's up. If she's up like if her arms are in the air, she's being dragged, and so she's leaning forward because she's being dragged like that. But also when she's being dragged, so if I'm JonBenet, if this is like a straight pin, right, and her arms are right here, right, she's being dragged like this and her legs are being dragged. But not only that, but she's being dragged kind of tilted to the left, almost as if, right, let's go back to our video, almost as if she's being dragged around the corner of something, right? And this is, I'm just speculating. So I'm not saying it's true, but I'm just speculating. So because we have to get to the wine cellar, something happening to where she can't, she was on her back for a little bit, possibly because we have to get to the wine cellar for her to release back here, for her bladder fills up again. I'm assuming for her to release back here. So if she's in this room or she's over here somewhere, not in this room, in this playroom, or outside of the playroom over here somewhere, and I have to drag her from here over here, that could cause to favor. or or if I'm over here and she's gone down over here, she's hit something over here that could cause me to have to drag her in favor and favor that left side, because I'm going to drag her around this and move her right here. And then I'm gonna drag her and I'm gonna turn her. Once I get here, I'm gonna drag her and turn her around, and then I might flip her over. And if I flip her over by accident or what have you, then we get that orange spot to where she's used the restroom, right? Okay. Or there's a lot of scenarios that could happen right there. So I'm not glued to that one. There's a lot of scenarios. She could have been redressed at this point or whatever, and leaked through or whatever. That's what I'm saying. She could have been redressed at this point. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. But anyways, dragged her around here and accidentally flipped her or what have you, or those abrasions and contusions could be from maybe she stepped back and hit something and hit like the hit her back, the lower back, and like her left calf on her leg, the left calf muscle right there. She could have hit the back of that going down on something. But what we're saying is very violent, knocking her back against stuff, dragging her around and stuff like that. That's very violent. And so this does not give the intent of somebody. So when we talk about somebody like a Gary Oliver, and we talk about somebody like a John Marcar, who they're writing odes to JonBenet, and they're saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my sweetie. Oh, I'm so sorry, my baby. How could I? I never meant to." Ain't no sorry, my sweetie. Ain't no sorry, my baby. This person did not care for JonBenet that way, because the way they're talking like it was an accident, babe. I'm so sorry. This person was not taking care of JonBenet. They had no reason to take care of JonBenet. Whoever you pick up and you say that this is because of them, they did not care about JonBenet in that way. They were giving JonBenet the business, and they were telling JonBenet, "Don't you ever mess with me." That's what they were telling JonBenet. You fight with, hey, look, you don't know who you're messing with. That's who did this. Okay, so let me get back to my notes. Not only are we kind of hanging up on the arms as being the angle for the drag, if we're going to say that, but this had to be somebody who is not an adult. Why do you say that? Because why would, if that's the case, and if she's dragged, an adult would have just picked her up. John already told you that he picked her up and took her inside. Patsy could have probably picked her up. So this is probably going to be someone who's younger. Whether somebody was in the house with them that night, this has got to be somebody who's younger, because an adult would have just picked her up and moved her. If this was an adult intruder, he would have just picked her up and moved her. Because think about what you're saying. If you're saying that an intruder picked up JonBenet and hit her with a stun gun and took her downstairs, wouldn't they also have picked her up and taken her around here? There is no reason for these marks to be on JonBenet, these dragging marks to be on JonBenet. That's what I'm saying. If we're going with the dragging theory, if we're going with the fact that she was dragged, the adult would have just picked her up and taken her to wherever they wanted. But if this is not, if she was dragged, then which is what this might suggest, then this had to be somebody who could not pick up 45 pounds and move it. And John already told us he picked her up. So it ain't John. And I don't believe it's Patsy, because Patsy could probably pick JonBenet up if she needed to. But we're dealing with somebody who may not be that strong enough to pick JonBenet up, so I have to drag her. You see what I'm saying? Somebody, even if we say the rope, even if we say somebody did it with a rope, why do you have to drag her? That's something different than SA. If you put a rope, if you circle her with a rope and you drag her, why? Why are you doing that? Okay? So It possibly happened in the basement, where you may have had this cluttered area near the train room based on the injury pattern and the floor plan that we're looking at. Okay, let's look at number 6: private area trauma and vascular congestion. This, I think, is probably the most debated part when we talk about SA, according to JonBenet. I think it's the most debated part because there's so many theories. There's so many things that could be, so many different directions that this could go. And people have pretty good reasons for why they believe what they believe. And so, um, and there have been experts, and I know John says that there are no experts that agree with the SA theory, but to my understanding, according to what some of the police are saying in some of the police reports, I think Tom Haney specifically, maybe what some of the suggestions are, is that there may have been prior assault, according to what Tom Haney is saying in some of the police reports. And Patsy was mentioning, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And I wanted to go to the transcripts on this. So what we're looking at right now is we're looking at the 1998 transcripts of John and Patsy. And this is going to be John's answer to this kind of whole ordeal. Right? Yeah. Okay. So uh, Mike Kane says the autopsy report. Have you seen it? And we talked about this a little bit. John Ramsey says no. Mike Kane says you haven't seen it. John says no, I have not. I can't look at that. Okay. Have you discussed in general what's in there? In general, very little. It's hard to discuss with her accidentally. Mike Kane says, what would that be? And because they kind of lose it to inaudible. What would that be? John Ramsey says that there was her skull fracture, that there were abrasions in her private area, and 2 of her organs were swollen, which indicated a slow death. Okay. Mike Kane says, did you do your own investigation into this? Did you have experts look into those? Like you said, there were bruises in her private area. John says, I don't know if we did. Mike Kane says, I mean, here, now. John Ramsey says, I know, not to my knowledge. Mike Kane says, okay, I'll bring in another aspect about the blank fragments. And John Ramsey says, well, I think we've had pathologists look into the report, but I don't know where or what they said. And then Mike Kane says, okay, so you never received the report then? And John Ramsey says, no. Mike Kane says something, and John Ramsey answers no. And then Mike Kane says, how about Miss Ramsey? Nope. And so John is answering for Patsy now. And other times he's going to say, oh, you have to ask Patsy that. But now he's answering confidently something for Patsy. What about, and so Mike Kane says, what do you understand about that trauma? Private area trauma. John Ramsey says, it's something that I don't like to think about. I don't understand or read anything about it because there are certain facts that I just can't bear to know. Mike Kane says, there's been some discussion that I've heard since I've gotten involved in the case that perhaps that it was prior private area trauma. Not only now, and he goes, now I'm not talking about assault or just abuse. And we're not talking about, let's say, private area assault or private area abuse, or some indications at least that there may have been something prior. Is there anything that you can think of that would account for that? Any opportunity she would have had to be alone with somebody, or even something innocently that might account for that? So we're talking about every aspect that we can look at this thing, everything on the spectrum, any opportunities, even if it's innocent, that can account for this prior abuse that we're seeing. John says, well, certainly not that we're aware of. And again, he's talking for Patsy. He's saying neither I nor Patsy are aware of this. So they're aligned on this. This might have been a point of contention that they had to get an answer for and come together on this. I mean, the kids stay with babysitters from time to time. Susan Savage was a babysitter, or Savage. Maybe you pronounce it different. But anyway, Susan Savage was a babysitter, a family babysitter that the kids would stay with. They stayed with her for a few other Patsy's mother did a lot. She would come out and stay with the kids if we were going to be gone for a while. There was a young college, well, she's in college, but she's a college age girl who sat for us several years before that if we needed her to and watched the kids. I remember Patsy when she went down to something, but it had been regular at that time. I don't think I can remember. Mike Kane says, were there any short term babysitters like if you go out for the evening? And John says, well, even Susan used to do that a lot. Okay, this other girl did before. And so John Ramsey says, this other girl did before that. Susan pretty much lived for us when Patsy had cancer that year. She did live with us. She was there from dawn till dusk for literally the whole year. Mike says, any other family members sit with, that than your mother-in-law? and and then John says, yeah, Don Paul stayed for a few times because he was their grandfather, or even they would go to his place. He had an apartment over on Pearl Street, not often or for very long, for an hour or two here. And Mike Kane says overnights. John Ramsey says, oh, there might have been one or two if we were going to be out late and we didn't want to wake the kids up when they come home. Mike Kane says, what do you think about them? There are certain babysitters you say you can't wait, and another they say they don't want to hear about. Are there any? John says, not that I recall. Did they enjoy staying with their grandfather? Uh huh. And with Susan, right? As I recall, I think probably the babysitter they weren't going to get to go to or to go blank. They only like to go and sleep. So babysitters in general might something a particular welcome be a welcoming sight or something like that. Could be. Lou Smith says, "How about neighbors, John? Any of your neighbors?" Um, John Ramsey says that babysat. Lou Smith says, "I don't think so. I don't think anyone." Mike says, "Was there ever? I've never seen her medical records, but I heard that you talked about comments about. I noticed she had blank at certain times. Was there ever a treatment that you or Miss Ramsey had to do at home for that?" And John Ramsey says, not that I did. I don't know. Mike Kane says, any antibiotic treatment or anything. John said, if there was, that was kind of between her and Patsy, you know. Okay. And I want to then switch over to what Patsy had to say about it. And let me make it a little bit bigger so that you can see. Yeah. Okay. So Tom Haney, and this is in 1998 as well. So Tom Haney says, okay, Miss Ramsey, are you aware that there had been prior private area intrusion on JonBenet? And Patsy says, no, I am not. Prior to the night she was killed? Tom Haney says, correct. No, I am not. Uh, didn't know that. No, I didn't. Does that surprise you? Extremely. Does that shock you? It shocks me. Does it bother you? Yes, it does. Patsy's not saying anything. She's not explaining anything. She's not asking any questions. She don't want to know nothing. She's just answering back. Hey, did you eat? Yeah. What'd you eat? Food. Was it good? Yeah. What are you doing? I'm trying to get to the bottom of your daughter's murder, and you are withholding information from me. You are being very hesitant with me in your answers. You are being short with me in your answers. Looks to me like a little bit of hostility. What has this man said that sets you off? Probably nothing. But we get to talking and we get to hitting around certain things that you don't want to talk about. All of a sudden, we got a problem. Hmm? All of a sudden, you're not answering these one word answers, these like short sentences. Are you aware of it? No, I am not. Uh, Prior to the night she was killed? Correct. No, I am not. No, not that I know of. Okay, I'll give her that. Didn't know that. No, I didn't. Does that surprise you? Extremely. Does that shock you? It shocks me. Does it bother you? Yeah, it does. Can you give me something? My goodness. Talk to me. I'm trying to find out. Man, who could she have been violated like that? I don't know. This is the absolute first time I've ever heard of that. Look at these hostile police. Look at what they say. Look at what they respond to her by saying. Take a minute, if you would. I mean, this seems, you didn't know that before right now. Take a minute. I understand that might be hard to understand. Just take a minute. Let's just take a step back here and let's try to think through this. Let's try to walk through this. Take a minute. It looks like you didn't really know that or understand that. So I'm trying to be nice to you. I don't see any hostility. Do you? They're hostile to me. That's why we didn't want to work with them. Okay. No, I absolutely did not. Okay, and I would like to see where it says that and who reported that. Why? Why are you worried about that? Are you about to try to defend against it and defend against me? Why are you getting so defensive all of a sudden? Who reported that? Who said it? For what? I didn't accuse you of anything. For somebody who says that they don't watch no TV, they don't do nothing, y'all sure certainly know what's going on. Oh man, I don't know anything. Well, you certainly know what the people are saying about you. Why do you need to know that? Because it sounds like you about to come in here and impose and project anger from what the tabloid is saying onto me. I haven't said anything. I'm just asking you a question. I could have came out and said, do you know anybody, whether innocently or not, who would have done this? And you could have just told me no. But instead, you're starting to get defensive. Where does it say that? And who reported that? We're trying to get down to the bottom of your daughter's death, right? Why are you worried about who said it and who reported it? Huh. Okay. Tommy says, okay, Patsy, now she's on the, okay, now she's on the offensive. Do you have that? Do you have it? Oh, you sitting up in your chair now. Now you're asking me questions. I couldn't get you to talk. I'm shocked. I'm extremely shocked. I'm very shocked. So shocked. More than a little bit of shocked. But now I say, hey man, it looks like this may have been the case. You aware of that? Where'd you get that from? Where's that? I'm trying to move on, and you stopping me and holding me here. Where's that at? Oh, think we on to something? Okay, because it's kind of like the pineapple when it's kind of like the pineapple when it's funny because when they asked Patsy about the pineapple, and I think it was Mike Kane or somebody, and they asked her about the pineapple, and Patsy, they said, did you talk to any pathologist or anything about it, gastroenterologist or anything? And Patsy was like, no, I didn't talk to anybody about the pineapple. I didn't nothing like that. And then I think they said something, and she was like, was it canned or was it fresh? Wait, what do you care? Or was it like gooey, or because I know when it's gooey it looks a little different. What does that matter? And I think they said something to the effect of trying to figure out, for death purposes and stuff like that. And she was like, "Well, if you can figure out death from it," and I'm kind of paraphrasing. She was like, "What did y'all find? Did y'all find anything?" And then I think Tom Haney was like, "Well, we're not at liberty to kind of discuss that right now and stuff like that." So, when we start circulating and triangulating around certain things, all of a sudden your interest, you perk up. You don't want to answer no questions. You got a bad attitude coming here. Oh, I just had to take my medicine. But now we get to asking certain questions. You got, okay, all right, I'm watching you. Well, I don't have it with us, no. As you can imagine, there's a lot of material, and we surely didn't want to bring all the photos. But and Patsy says, "Well, can you find it?" Oh, you ain't gonna let it go. Tommy says, "Yeah, because I think it's pretty significant." Yeah, because I think it's pretty significant. Um, okay. And Patsy says, "I think it's darn significant. I'm shocked." You mad at me? Are you mad at me? Or are you mad at the person who did this? Because I'm just trying to make sure the energy is not towards me, because I didn't do anything. I'm just, just trying to talk. I'm shocked. Oh, I see you sitting up in your chair now. Ellis Armstead says, to be fair, Tom, that's been a subject of debate in the newspaper whether or not she represented what is true as a fact. I don't want you to alarm my client too much here about whether or not it's absolutely a fact. I just think that should be mentioned to be fair to my client. Tom Haney says, and based on the reliable medical information that we have at this point, that is a fact. Patsy Ramsey says, now when you say violated, what are you telling me here? And then Tom Haney says that there was some prior private area intrusion, that something was inserted. Come on, let's talk about it. Patsy says, prior to this night that she was assaulted. And then Tom Haney says and Patsy cuts him off and says, what report? As I want to see what you're talking about. I don't I'm shocked. Oh, I'll bet you are. Hmm. Now we're on the offensive. Now Patsy has gone beyond anything that her lawyer can say, and Patsy's taking over the interview. This is when emotion comes out, because you said something to me that's piqued my interest. And now I got to know a little bit more about that. I want to know what you got going on. Tell me more. Where is that report? Why do you want the report? So you can take it back to your lawyer and y'all can strategize around it, and y'all can then give me an answer for it? No, I'm not doing that. Because y'all like to take the information and go and find the answer. That's why the cops are trying to stop y'all and trying to get y'all separated from Burke, and trying to use the grand jury to get y'all separated from Burke, so y'all don't go and, oh, just give me the questions and I'll answer in writing. No, sit right here and talk to me about them. If you're really honest, sit right here and talk to me about them. Don't give me some sort of, I don't want to be a pin pal with you. Give me the answer right here, right now. If you don't have anything to hide, give me the answer right here, right now. Be straight up with me. Patsy's just so shocked. She's putting on. It seems like she's starting to put on that acting face again, um, and so Tom Haney says, "Where? Well, that's one of the things that's been bothering us about the case." Patsy says, "No darn kidding." And Tom Haney says, "What does that tell you?" Patsy says, "Doesn't tell me anything. I mean, I knew. I." And then Tom Haney says, "Okay, for a second." And Patsy, I guess, you know, looks over to Ellis and she said, "Do you know about this? Did you know about this?" But Patsy doesn't really finish telling us what she knew. Ellis Armstead says, I tried to stay out of making of the record and inserting myself into the tape recording of this interview. The newspapers have talked about this, whether or not. And Patsy says, well, they talk about a lot of things that are not true. Um, you haven't even looked at the autopsy report, baby girl. What do you know about what's true or not? What are you talking about? You don't know if anything's true. You don't look at the autopsy report. You don't look at the news. You don't look at anything. And see, that's what I'm saying. You and John start calling things false in fiction and say, well, a lot of that stuff in the media is not true. No, no, no. We're talking about facts that we looked at. Oh, well, that stuff is not true. No. Burke said, the media, Burke said he went back downstairs. Stop doing that. We got somebody to hold you accountable. Ellis Armstead, and because y'all act like y'all out of the loop when y'all don't want to believe something. And there has been a debate among the people who talked about the findings in the autopsy report as to whether there was prior private area intrusion or not. So when you ask either Tom or me or Trip or Jennifer, did we know that? There has been a debate about that, even in the newspaper. Right. So what I'm saying, and so what Ellis is saying, and Ellis is on your team. This is your boy. And Ellis is saying, there's been, it's not us talking about it, just us talking about it. This is something that is in the newspaper that we've read. So it's not just us. And then Patsy Ramsey says, well, I don't know of anything and I am very distressed about this. And then so Tom Haney says, who could have done this? Patsy says, I don't know. I don't have any idea. And Tom says, what's your best guess? I couldn't begin to guess. I'm shocked. I don't have any idea. I just can't believe this. Tom Haney says, would that knowledge change your answer to any question that you have been asked? No, sir. I've answered every question that you or anyone else has asked me to the best of my ability. I'm not talking about have you answered any question to the best of your ability. I'm talking about now that you know this has happened to her, can you go back into your mind and think and say, well, so and so was acting funny with her. Well, so and so was acting funny, but they completely stay away from it. You know how when they start talking about, oh, who could have done this in certain aspects outside of this, and then John Ramsey is like, oh, the Colby kids, they were weird. The Colby kids' dad, they were weird. Fleet and Priscilla White, they're weird. Did y'all check this guy out? He's weird. Oh, what about this other guy? He's weird. And they start to throwing people in there and all such as that. But when it comes to this, they act like they can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Oh, I don't know anyone. No one? You don't know anyone? You can't start to think of anything? This is something. Okay. Um, uh, because I'm not asking you if you answer to the best of your ability. I'm asking you, now that you know, what does that make you think? Tom says, would that answer or would that statement, that information, would that lead you in any particular direction? Would you think about a particular person being involved or doing something with JonBenet? So he tries to clarify. Patsy says, I don't know. I'm just shocked is all I can say. I don't know what I think. I just want to see where it says that. Why? And prior to the day, had you heard or read or seen anything about, and Patsy says, I heard that the night she was killed, she may have had been assaulted, but not prior to that. Absolutely. And Tom says, have you ever suffered any physical abuse? Absolutely not. In childhood, dating, your adult life. Patsy responds, it's inaudible. Tom Henny says, how about abuse? And Patsy says, it's inaudible. How about anybody in your family ever suffered any physical abuse? Patsy Ramsey says, not to my knowledge. Tom Haney says, what about your sisters? Not to my knowledge. Any abuse? Have they ever confided in you that? And Patsy says, nope. What's this got to do with JonBenet? And Tom Haney says, what it has to do with first of all, is whether or not you have ever really discussed things like this with people or somebody has confided in you. Patsy Ramsey says no. So this ain't something that y'all even talk about. This ain't something that you would even be talking about with anybody had it happen. You've never had this conversation with you, your sisters, or any of your homegirls. And then you ask and like, why are you getting defensive? What's this got to do with JonBenet? I'm trying to, I mean, to me, it's clear. I'm trying to see if there's a history of abuse in your family. Because if you tell me, well, there was you know, then I can go look at a family member or a friend and get a better idea and say, okay, that might be our intruder. But Patsy and John ain't touching this with a 10-foot pole. They're leaving it alone. And so when we look at this, the swelling and the irritation in the private area, for example, inflammation resulting from the insertion or the digital contact, this happened when she was alive. Now, to what we can see from this first page, from what I can see, there's no evidence of chronic trauma or prior trauma, but the inflammation rules out this happening post-mortem. So this is not a post-mortem thing. This is something that happened when she was alive. Okay. Now we might find evidence or some things that suggest maybe later in the autopsy. I don't know, but right now we can't see that just from page one. And so, could this have triggered a violent reaction? Just asking. Possibly, if JonBenet cried out or resisted, that may have caused a panic or rage-filled escalation. So, such as that, if you did something, could she have slapped the person? Possibly. We theorize that if she screamed and slapped in response to pain or shame, it could have triggered a blow to the head. So if somebody was doing this and she's in a position to where she's standing upright, and somebody is asking, hey, JonBenet, can I do this or whatever, and JonBenet doesn't anticipate pain, um and it happens, and she might scream, and a reflex might cause her to slap, and so that might bring about humiliation and shame. And so we ask, why use a rope afterward? We're trying to pinpoint where the rope came in. If a person was still holding it, say you're playing a game of horsey, or you're using it as some sort of stethoscope, right, or something like that, you know they may have clenched it reflexively during an emotional collapse. So if you did that to me and I already had it available, and if we're using it for something, and you slap me, and you know I tense up, I'm pushing you, I'm don't why'd you do that to me, possibly. So section 3, emotional behavior interpretation. Let's start diving into this. And I think, yeah, we're almost done, so we have an opportunity to close it down. The forensic details open a window into a plausible emotional sequence, one grounded in how individuals, particularly children or emotionally underdeveloped persons, react to shame, rejection, or threat. Because we're talking about the level of violence here. When somebody might put their hands on you and say, "Oh, that hurt me," and they slap you, and or they put their hands on you, or they fight you, and you're not looking to be opposed, that might cause a level of shame, maybe something that it's something that's wrong or something that you should not be doing, but you do it anyway, right? But when somebody slaps you, it brings you back to the fact that I'm not supposed to be doing this, and it brings you to the realization, and that overwhelming realization might cause you to act out a little bit, especially in response to maybe a very rough, a rough initiation from that person. Okay, and so we reconstruct and we say JonBenet may have wet herself, which is common at her age, is what they're saying. This draws attention to her area. A person, maybe a peer or an impulsive adolescent, engages in inappropriate curiosity. The act becomes physically intrusive, digital contact, right? Possibly. We're just kind of theorizing. I'm not saying it's true, but this is one of many things. JonBenet reacts, pain, possibly a scream, maybe a slap. The response provokes a sudden emotional rupture of rage. Person lashes out, possibly still holding the rope, strikes her with a nearby object. JonBenet falls. The person, mid-range or in panic, tightens the rope, right? And so, psychologically speaking, the blow is a reaction to an emotional injury, a bit embarrassment, shame, or loss of control. And so, you slap me, I hit you back. You fight me, I fight you back. Because not only did I want this to go my way and with no opposition, you opposed me, and I now I feel wrong for doing what I'm doing, and you oppose me, and I don't like that. You know, people act very different when you oppose them, and they can't tell you, I don't like that you opposed me, because they feel a little bit of shame and guilt. But if you put your hands on me, then I can't touch you yet. But if you put your hands on me and you slap me and say stop, well, then I can respond and say, "Oh, I'm only doing this because you hit me. Don't hit me." And it's not really about that you hit me. It's about that I'm ashamed. I'm already ashamed and I'm overwhelmed, even though it's just me and you. In your eyes, I'm ashamed, and those further interactions between you and I are going to be awkward, because you could tell mom, you could tell dad, you could tell my mom, you could tell my dad. If we're talking about somebody outside of the home, you could tell my brothers, you could tell my sisters, you could tell people across the street, you could tell people at school, you could tell anybody that I did this, right? And you could tell, if my grandparents happen to meet your parents, or my parents happen to meet your parents, you could bust out, and all of our parents are having, and I don't want to come back over here, but all of our parents are having lunch together, and because we've decided to be on good terms, and you bust in there and say this and that, and my parents look at me, because John and Patsy are looking at my parents, and my parents are looking at me like, you gonna embarrass me in front of guests, in front of our friends, and I feel stupid, so I don't like that. So I'm upset, you know. And so that blow is a reaction to the emotional injury of embarrassment, shame, and loss of control. Because I had you, and I'm doing this. This is something I'm curious about, something I'm interested in, and now I feel like now you have control, because now you showed me your attitude, and you're mad. This tightening of the rope is part panic, part lingering rage, like clenching a controller or balling up your fist. And so, when I hit you over the head and you go down, you're still up, you know, and I may twist or I might pull. I'm not pulling to intentionally, in a sense that I'm intentionally trying to hurt you, as in I planned this. I'm pulling because I am experiencing the last remnants of rage. I am experiencing the last few seconds of rage. Like, if if you go to like a rage room or something like that, and you clench a bat really tight, and you just bang the TV and you hit the TV or what have you, and after you get done hitting that TV, you're still just, and you got to come down. Your emotions, even though you feel like you've done everything that you needed to do, your emotions still have to come down from that. So you're kind of like on this rage high. And so that might have been, you turned, and the 30 seconds that you held are part of, like, sometimes when you go into a rage and you're angry about something, there is this sound that comes into your ears, and it's like just like a pinging sound. It's like a straight ping sound, and it stays, and you hold whatever you're doing until it goes away, because you can't tell how long it's gonna whatever, because somebody may make you angry, and for those 20, 30 seconds, those 10 seconds, you're like, you know what I mean? And so, and sometimes it's not for an amount of time. Sometimes it's until you achieve or reassert dominance over something. I am reasserting dominance, and until I can get back into a position of dominance, I'm chasing you around, and I'm upset. And if you run away from me and I catch you, um, because I've seen that before. When you hit somebody and uh they run away, and when they catch you, they just start wailing on you, just wailing. I've seen that. um so it could be something like that. And so you never know how. And as a kid, I've seen that, I did it firsthand, and and whatnot. And so you're mad, and so that whatever object is close, it's not done intentionally, but as I pre-planned this. But since that's here, I'm so mad that I go and I grab and and I put this over and I just and I shake you. You see what I'm saying? And because of that, I am squeezing tighter and tighter and tighter because the remnant and the overwhelming driving force of rage is causing me to hold until I get every last drop of that out. And so I'm not trying to hold you for any specified. It's a mind thing. Until I get this out. How long you do it? Until I get this out. And I'm holding and I'm holding until I get it out. So, um, tightening of the rope is like a panic. It's clenching, a controller balling a fist. It's the lingering rage. The death itself may have resulted from the emotional dysregulation, not a calculated murder. So when we think about the rope had to already be constructed from the paintbrush. It was early. It was made either earlier in the day during play or fashioned for another unclear purpose. It could have been made at some other time period in which the person was like, "I'm just going to make this just because I can," you know and its availability at the scene and the inability to go upstairs without being heard reinforces that it was already in the room. That had to already be near. So if I made this and I set it to the side and said, "Hey, look what I made," and maybe, anyways, I'm just gonna leave it right there. Hey, look what I made, and you know, I'm just gonna leave it right there. Its presence in hand during the blow gives credibility to the theory that it was used as an emotional outlet and not a planned killing device. Right. So this may have, like we said, this may have just been like that lingering rage. So as we conclude, we bring this to a close. Thanks for watching. Um, JonBenét's death may not have been the result of a fully formed intent to kill, but rather a catastrophic unraveling of control, humiliation, curiosity turned to panic, and impulsive violence. In this reading, the rope, and under this sort of this scenario, um, the rope becomes not just the mechanism of death, but the emotional symbol of an attacker's need to reassert control and release. I would say, I would add, and release emotional anger, tension, stress, things of that nature. Her injuries reflect not just what was done to her, but how the person doing it was unraveling. So, just like we're saying, this is not just about what was done to JonBenet. This was reflective of an individual's mindset, right? How the person was breaking apart, falling apart. At this time, somebody was unraveling. Their mental state was gone on this. So, um, next steps that we're going to do, we're going to kind of continue to look at the rest of the autopsy report and kind of see what we can figure out and stuff like that. But until then, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate you for supporting and everything you do. Thank you to all my community members for watching and everything such as that. And thanks again. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. And until next time, take it easy.